You're muted, Kyle.
And so it is. Welcome to Design, CSS, Sass, and related topics. Cool. So what I was thinking is that we would maybe talk about a really common design pattern, and then maybe work on implementing it together. So one I had in mind, you've seen it and seen it and seen it. Looks like this. Come on, a little bit better. So you have this big hero image, and then it has,
Can you share your screen, Kyle?
how about I do that? It's Friday for everybody.
And what a Friday it is.
So it's got maybe some text here, and then probably some call to action right under it. And then right below that,
Kyle, not to interrupt, but do you like this whiteboarding tool?
it's my favorite one I've used so far. I've been shopping, so this is probably like the 5th or 6th one I've used in the last couple of months.
That's why I figured it would be a good question to ask you, because I know you've tried a few.
I have tons of gripes with this one too, but I think it works the most reliable. So this one is, it's called Open Board. It's for every platform. You can get it yourself. But
No, I've just been looking for a good whiteboarding tool, you know, to just kind of sketch things out.
give this one a shot. But like, for example, you can't run it in a window. It's always full screen, like by design. So there's some things like that that I find curious.
Yeah, sorry to sidetrack this.
And then we've got like these 3 columns here that have some feature and then some benefit. And then you've got this footer here that's got whatever, copyright notice. Okay, super common design. See this all over the place. So let's kind of dig in on this a little bit. If we want to make this first part here, right away, we run into a ton of challenges. What are they?
You've either got to flex the entire page to like fill it, you've got to make it 100% height, or like, I'm assuming this is filling the entire vertical space.
Oh yeah. So like that's problem number 1, is we have to make it take up the screen. Because remember, HTML was designed for like research documents and shit. It wasn't designed as an application layout tool. And so a lot of things like fill up the screen, that ends up actually being a little bit of a stretch for CSS, no pun intended. Okay, so that's a problem. What else?
Keeping it separate from the other cards?
Yes. What else?
Inherently, everything's going to display in a column.
Yep. So if I want to vertically center this and horizontally center it, oof, it's a little bit hard. Okay, so another issue that's going to come up with this, and this is the #1 thing you can do to make your apps not look like shit, is we got to get some typography going. We have some like light design elements that we got to get figured out. And I see one student after another push this off to like an hour before their project. Please stop doing this. It should be one of the first things you do, is like figure out your typography. So let's see if we can get this one figured out. So I'd like you to code along with me on this. So let's what's the product we're selling here? Give me now.
Sneed.
Sneed, cool. All right, so nothing in this folder, nothing up this sleeve, nothing up this sleeve. I want you to make an index HTML and an app.css, and that's all we need for this app. I want you to scaffold out that index HTML. Needs the doc type. Needs the HTML tags. Needs the body. Needs a title. Needs a meta char set. Cool. And then let's see, for this body, let's call this a section. And we're going to give it an ID of hero. And we're going to put a couple things in here. I want us to have an H1 with the name of the app. And then we're going to have a div, the class of call to action, and it's going to have a paragraph that says, have no fear, Sneed is here. And then it's going to have a call to action. Nah, it's just going to be a link. It says learn more. Cool. That's all the HTML we need for this hero. I'm going to give you a sec to get caught up. Your screen should look something like mine.
Is hero the industry term for that, like, opening image thing?
Yep. Really, any large image is a hero.
Does that come from Bootstrap now?
I think it was popularized by Bootstrap, but it's a lot of these things are like pretty classic layout ideas.
Thank you.
Cool. Give me a thumbs up if you're ready to go. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Austin, Adrian, Bob, Logan, Bryce. All right. Looks like we're in pretty good shape. So with just this, we can serve that up. It's light server. Oops, I forgot to include the CSS file. That's fine. And like, I think this is a key thing. This is like a sign you're on the right track. Is that's not incomprehensible. And that should always be the case. When you have something that's unstyled, it should still kind of work. Like the browser default styles, like it should still kind of look like your app a little bit. Even if the layout isn't there, the content should be. And it's always a big smell to me if you turn off the style sheets for a site and it just becomes a jumbled mess of garbage that's all on top of each other. That means you didn't semantically do your markup correctly. All right, so we got that. Next thing we got to do is link this style sheet. So we're going to link rel style sheet, and then href is app.css. Cool. And if we go into that app.css file, I like doing this one just to like sanity check myself. Is this thing actually wired up? And right now, it doesn't look like it is.
Probably gonna make you do that whole text CSS thing.
You know what?
No, I didn't have to do that.
Some more Chrome bullshit. Why does that keep happening? It's 404ing. Shouldn't 404 though. It's app.css.
Did you do dot slash?
I shouldn't.
Yeah, I didn't have to. I was just.
Do you have to close off your link tag?
No. God, this is so weird. All right. Go in Firefox. Why this has been happening to me for like only for the last 3 weeks. My God. This is so infuriating.
Our mod cursed your computer.
All right. And there, all still works. What the living fuck? All right. So, all right, now let's figure out how we're going to make that look more like that. So, one other thing that should be in there is the, we'll put the little, like, the logo right about there. Okay, so this whole CTA thing here, give me some ideas for how I can make it do that.
You give it a class, a button, or whatever, then give that a size and a height hover property.
So give the hero a size and a height?
The anchor tag.
The anchor. Ooh, interesting.
Isn't that your call to, isn't that the learn more?
So part of the issue is that we want this hero to take up like the whole green box here. Let's take a look at
Okay.
what it is now.
So could you wrap the whole section in an anchor tag?
Well, this is the section right now, and I want that to take up the entire screen. Yeesh.
Oh, okay. I was misunderstanding the question. My apologies. Could you set the height and width to the viewport 100%?
Yeah.
Viewport width and height.
So really common mistake people make here is ID.
Oh, you did an ID. Yeah.
Is you go, all right, I want the height to be 100%. And I do that. And then, all right, well, how big is it? What the fuck? Why isn't it? Why didn't it go 100%? What's the problem?
Do you have to make the body a flex display first?
Maybe, but even that's not going to quite do it.
It's going 100% of the container that it's in.
Right. And that's how big the body is. Oof.
So you would first need to make the body 100%.
Well, let's see. That didn't do it either. What the fuck?
You set it to view height instead of percent.
Yeah. So there's a unit called Viewport Height units. And if you do that, hey, there we go. So a viewport, you can think of it, I mean, it's like a cruise ship or something like that. It's the thing you're looking through to see your app. So like the app might be bigger, it might scroll, it might whatever. The viewport is the thing that's on your screen right now. So the units are percentage based. So 100 VH is 100% of the viewport. But this is kind of fucked up. Why is it scrolling now? Because of that. Why is it scrolling?
Because it's consuming, because there's still space for the body. So the body's surrounding it and you're taking up 100% of the screen inside the body. So there's extra.
Yeah, so if it says here that this is 932 pixels high, which is how big my viewport is, but I've got all that white shit around it. Where did that come from? I didn't put that in. You're looking at the only style that's on this page.
Browsers have default styling.
Yeah, there we go. So somebody who isn't Jason, what are browser default styles?
I didn't hear what you said.
What are browser default styles? That's what's causing this.
There's some padding and some margin.
Yep. Your browser is always going to, it has its own style sheet. That's why this H1 is bigger than this. In fact, if we inspect it, say it says no styles there, but if we go to computed styles and we say, show me the browser styles, hey, there's all kinds of styles on this, including things like font family, font size, 24 pixels. So we have to override some of those things. So the body in particular, look at the layout here. Look, it's got 8 pixels of margin all the way around the side. So if we say margin 0, any style sheet that you write always overrides the browser style sheet. And now that margin's gone. All right, all right. That's weird. Why do I still have that thing at the top? Any guesses? It's also a browser style.
I guess. I was trying to leave it for other people.
H1s also have some default margin. Hey, now we're getting a little bit closer. So this process is called resetting. And you can even download entire style sheets that are designed to completely reset your browser styles. Which is nice too, because every browser has different default styles. And if we don't want it to like look a little bit different in every browser, we can just reset all the styles. The trade-off is then we have to write all the styles by hand. But if I'm being honest, I was always going to do that. Cool.
Would you recommend using those style sheets to reset everything?
Yeah, shit. I'm kind of inclined to do it right now. I'm never not happy that I reset the styles. So the most popular one's called the Meyer reset. And there it is. The actually, we can just copy and paste it in. No need to get fancy. So we just copy that in. Like that. And there's one more that I always add to the Meyer reset. And it's star
Box sizing.
box sizing border box. That is one of a few things in CSS that I consider a bug, that they should have never done this way, and this fixes it. Cool. So I want to pause again and give you a second to get caught up. This is the only one of your own styles that you need, but I want you to go to the Meyer reset, copy and paste this into your CSS file, and make sure you've got box sizing border box as well. Go.
Kyle, what does that asterisk do?
It matches every element.
Okay. And then what is the box sizing property?
So it determines how height, width, padding, and margin work. So if you set the width of something to 100%, by default, it doesn't take into account the padding. So if you have any padding on an element and you set it to 100%, it's going to add the padding on top of the 100%, which is not what anybody fucking wants. And so when you set it to border box, setting something to 100% is inclusive of the padding.
Cool.
The next thing that I would like you to do is mention one of our top priorities really early on is to fix this bullshit type. See, hey, look, see how the H1 isn't any bigger than the P tag now? That's what we want. That's better. So if we go to Google Fonts, we got about 1,000 like open license, pretty damn good fonts or typefaces. What's the difference between a font and a typeface? There is a difference.
Is the typeface everything that has that sort of look, and then the font is the specific of like the italic version or the weight of each specific one?
Yes, it's even more specific than that. It's also the size. So Roboto is a typeface. Roboto at 400 weight at 16 pixels, italic is a font. And where that comes from, typography, I think, is one of the most interesting topics in design. As I remember that Helvetica documentary, I came home once and Elise was watching that. I was like, "You're watching a documentary on a font?" And what she should have said was, "No, I'm watching a documentary on a typeface." But what's the thing that kind of opens the door on typography is you realize how much meaning we can convey with these little fucking squiggles, and how different you can make them look, and how much they're still totally recognizable. That's fascinating. So the way that fonts used to work is you'd have a type foundry, and they would design these letter forms, like for Roboto or something like that. And then you would sell like the letters themselves, you'd sell as little metal punches. And then like you'd roll ink on them and then you'd press them onto something. And so you'd like lay out all those little like letter blocks on these big sheets. They're like wooden things with little rows on them, and you align them on there, and you do spaces with like blank blocks and things like that. And then you'd like put ink on them and you'd stamp something with it. And that was the printing press. So if you wanted a different size, that was a different collection of letters that you bought. You would buy like, I would like this font, please, and I need 2 of them because we use them so much. And then like the eyes would break, and so they'd have to make the eyes thicker because the eyes were too thin or something. And so that ended up becoming part of the design of some of these letter forms, and it's became some of the reason that people liked them, is that they were really sturdy, or they really worked well with the medium that they were trying to print to. And what's especially interesting about this is like the reason that this looks metal, like why does that look metal? There's nothing like intrinsically metal about it, but it's pretty well named. What looks metal about that?
The edges.
But why? Why does it look like Enya?
Because we decided that that's what metal is.
And why did we decide that?
Well, the letters are like sharp lines and feel very thick and heavy.
Yep. Also, and like this is like super simple, because metal bands use it. Like metal bands do things that have like shit like that in their typography. Ergo, now that's metal. Same thing with Comic Sans. Comic Sans, you look at that and you go, oh, this is bullshit. The person doing it is either being ironic or is dumb. But the reason for that, it's not a bad typeface. It's actually a very good typeface. And it happened to be one of like 4 default installed typefaces on Windows 95, which was one of the first times that regular people got to change the font of something. And so everybody became a little amateur designer, and they started making their church newsletters with it, and they started making their garage sale like signs with it. And it became just like a sign that you don't really know what you're doing. And so now when you see that typeface, that's kind of what you think. This is the other thing that's really fascinating about typography, is they're culture sponges. They like, the reason that something feels elegant or weighty or proud or solid or wispy or whatever is purely because of the cultural connotations that like we've seen things like that used in before. That's really interesting. Huh. Cool. So this thing's called Sneed. So we got to find something that we think kind of embodies Sneed. And there is like, there's a lot to this. Like, right now we're looking at all kinds of different families of typefaces. And like those have a history to it. And there is like some science to our art of typeface selection. But it's also reasonable, especially when you're getting started, like, all right, what does Sneed mean to me? Which one of these makes me feel kind of sneedy? And so I want something that's like a little fun, but like, this is one of the easiest ways you can tell that something is amateur hour, is it goes for really wild, like typefaces with huge personalities to them, when usually you're better off going with something a little bit more low key. I'm gonna go with Nanito. I've been using Nanito a lot lately. Another like shortcut is, it says how many styles there are for something. If you go up to the top of Google Fonts and you go to font properties and number of styles and put this up to like 12, somewhere in there, they don't make a ton of different styles for shitty typefaces. So like that's a really good way to narrow down 992 to 52. And like, sure enough, most of these are either classic or modern classic typefaces. So, all right, let's go with Manito. Okay, so these are the different weights. And if we want to use one of these, we're going to say that call to action, that should probably be black. That's 900. But I'm also going to want one that's regular size, which is 400. All right, so I've got those two. And then to put those in, you can either copy and paste that on your HTML document, or my preference, use this import statement here. So you're going to take the thing that starts with @import, copy that in. Doesn't matter where you put it. And that makes that font available on your, those two fonts available for your site. And then to use them, for the body, we're going to say font family, and then Nunito. And then everything you put, like these comma separated things, these are called fallbacks. Like this is going to get downloaded from the internet every time somebody hits your site, unless they have it already. But their internet might be down, or like the connection might be flaky or something like that. So you always want to have at least one fallback, and at least one of those fallbacks should be something that is already installed on the system. But if you do that, hey, that's starting to look a little bit more sneedy. And then if I say that actually, the H1 I'm going to keep there. The heroes, let's see, what I call this other one? Call to action. This call to action, the paragraph that's in it, I want that to have a weight of 900.
When you selected it at Google, what strength did you select? Does it matter?
I took a 400 and a 900.
What's your advice for like how many weights we should be installing?
As few as you can get away with, because each one makes the download slower, which slows down the loading of your page. You want like some medium weight body type, pretty much always. It's handy to have a bolder one for like headings and stuff. And it's usually handy to have an italic. But if you can get away with like just those three, that's not a bad place to be in. Oops, weight, font weight. There we go. Cool, and then I'm also going to make this font size 64 pixels. That is not Nunito. Why aren't you downloading my font? So I can troubleshoot this by narrowing down my network thing to fonts. And it didn't make any requests. Uh-oh. We got something hinky happening. God, does that need to be at the top? Maybe it does. There we go. I guess your importance does need to be at the top. Cool. Now we've got a real typeface going on. I'm gonna move that back over here. Cool. So I'm gonna give you a sec to get caught up. Doesn't have to be Nanito. You can play around with it a little bit if you want, but get a Google font. You have to import it up at the top of the file, just learned. And if you set it to the body, that'll make that the default type for the whole page. And then I would target that paragraph tag inside the call to action and set a weight and a size.
Hey Kyle, why do you have to have the arrow after the call to action?
So I technically don't have to. It'll probably work the same way if I take it out. The difference is that the arrow is more specific. It's saying I only want to target paragraphs that are direct children of call to action. So for example, I had other paragraph tags in here, like those wouldn't be affected by that. So it probably doesn't matter, but if I can be more specific, I try to be.
What would be the difference if you used like a comma instead of?
Good question.
Isn't that like all paragraphs in there in the call to action, or?
No.
I think it's all call to actions and all paragraph tags.
There you go. Well done. That's exactly what that is. That's just two different selectors. This is one selector.
Gotcha.
Does that limit the call to action selector to only with those with paragraph children?
No, other way around. You read them right to left.
Okay.
And Kyle, if you declare it twice, so like at the top we declared a bunch of styles, right? Pretty much every element. Anything you declare later on will just override what you already declared, correct?
Correct. Later styles override earlier styles. So yeah, if I also did that, that overrides it. Here's an interesting thing about that, though. Watch this. All right, so I make this 16 pixels, and it overrides. This is a thing that people get tripped up on by CSS all the time. Oop, I wanted that the other way. Weird. Why didn't it override it?
Because the first one is more specific.
Correct. So the later styles will override earlier styles if they are the same specificity. You count specificity by how many elements, how many classes, how many IDs. So
And
this
don't
is,
different types of specificity have like different weights to them?
yes. So the mental model for this is that you could call an element selector, like that P, that's 1 point. And a class selector is 10 points. And an ID selector like this is 100 points. And then an inline style is 1,000 points. And so you just add up all of the things you have. So this is a class and an element. So that specificity is 11. This is just an element, so specificity is 1. And so 11 will always beat 1, even if it's later.
Do you organize your CSS based on specificity?
Like, don't. You'll you'll hurt yourself in the long run doing that. But since I said we're going to mention Sass kind of ends up doing that, because if I was to rewrite this with Sass, it would look like this. Which ends up also kind of organizing it by specificity. Cool, onward. So, right off the bat, this is like looking slightly less like a kind of crappy student app. So let's talk about what else we could do. We're trying to do vertical and horizontal centering on all of this. We have the container big enough now. That helps. What else?
Can you do a Flexbox?
Yeah, I can do a Flexbox. What am I going to flex? What's the container? What are the children?
This is the hero container.
Okay, this hero container. Yeah, let's see what happens if I flex that. That made it worse. Okay, so now that container is flexed. Also, in both Chrome and Firefox DevTools, it'll tell you, it has this little flex thing here, and if you click on it, it shows you how the browser is considering this flex. It's kind of cool. All right, so I flexed that, now what?
Maybe do a flex direction column.
Okay. All right, that's a little bit better. What else?
I think like justify content center maybe will do something.
Hell yeah! Why did that work? I thought justify content was left to right.
It's the direction of the flex axis, which we changed by going to column.
There you go. Primary axis, cross axis. Justify content is on the primary axis. Okay, and then if I want to,
if we did a line item center, that should put it in the middle.
cool, very nice. That's kind of surprising though. Why isn't learn more centered also?
If you use like an aligned content, it would have censored everything as opposed to just the one, the top.
Oh, maybe. Think about this in terms of like flex children, flex parents.
Your div isn't a flex container, so the stuff inside of it is still just living as block elements.
Exactly. This hero, which is like the whole screen, that's my flex container. This call to action, that's one of the flex children. The things inside of it, those are grandchildren. Flex doesn't have any impact on grandchildren. Now I can also flex the call to action container. I can inception that thing all the way down if I want. Cool. So I think I actually don't even need to do that. Maybe. Let's see. Yeah, I would need to do that. So if I take this call to action, and flex that also. All right. Probably also want to make that one column. That helps. And then what if I align items to center it on its cross axis? Hey! Now I'm getting somewhere.
Could you have just done text align center to get it all in the middle?
That's a really good question. All right, I'm gonna comment that out. And I want call to action, anchor tag, text align, center. What? Why didn't that work?
You're missing a dash in the call to action.
Oop. That still didn't fix it. Why not?
I don't know why this would have.
Go for it,
Go ahead,
Lydia.
Jason.
Oh, no, go ahead, Lydia. I've been talking a lot. Go ahead.
I don't know why this would have changed anything, but I didn't have the A tag after call to action, and it worked.
Oh yeah, that would. Why didn't this work?
Our anchor element line.
The anchor is what?
Our anchor element's inline.
It is. And
It's centering the text within the anchor element instead of within the containing.
This anchor tag, look how much space that takes up. Learn more is centered inside of that. If I had wrapped that in its own paragraph tag and centered that, or any block level element, that'll center. This is a good example of what I mean by like, that's very logical. But you have to be in a CSS kind of mindset for that. None of this stuff is intuitive. Okay. So that thing's centered. Two things I want to do here. One is I don't like this Sneed thing being centered here. That feels kind of dumb to me. So how do I override? I want these things centered, but I want Sneed. I want that overall on the left.
Isn't it like justify south?
Ooh, interesting. Let's see. So if I target that H1, well, that didn't do it. For the record, I think justify self should exist on Flex Elements, but it does not.
I think align self works.
Align self does exist. You can align the cross axis. You cannot align the primary axis for items. So that works. Another thing we could do with this H1, since I really want that up in the corner, it kind of doesn't have anything to do with this whole like flex shit that I'm doing. So what I could do is I can absolutely position it. So when I absolutely position something, I take it completely out of the document flow. And I can put it wherever I want. Like that. Now, since it's not in the document flow, what I mean by that is like, take a look at what I had a second ago. It'll go on top of stuff. It can't push anything out of the way. It essentially like has no more weight. But I can position it however I want to now.
Kyle, could you speak briefly about the difference between like absolute positioning and floating things?
Yes, floating things is something you probably shouldn't do anymore in 2020. Floating was a hack. Or like, let me rephrase that. Positioning things with floating was a hack because we didn't have a really great way to do that. So what you would do is you'd absolutely position, or you would have two things and you'd float one of them, and so that like the left part of it overlapped something else, and it made it look like you were doing, for example, columns. It was insanely confusing. Flex and Grid have fixed all of that. There's still one case where you still need floats, and that's if you're like doing something like wrapping text around an image, like they do in newspapers and stuff. That's where you use floats. Otherwise, absolute positioning probably works better.
Cool. I learned CSS like 6 months ago with floats instead of Flexbox. So
that's somebody who was like, well, Flexbox is going to be the next big thing, but we're not quite there yet. That's somebody who doesn't take CSS seriously. And if you're ever curious about, well, how true is that? Can I use Flexbox? Go to caniuse.com. And the CSS flexible box module layout. I see fields of green. It's super fucking well supported and has been for a long time. It didn't work in IE6, which has a global usage of 0.32%. All 0.32% of those are government agencies, by the way. Yeah, don't do layout with floats. It's terrible. Cool. Hey, this is starting to look a little bit better. Now, next thing, that learn more anchor tag. I want it to look like a button. Why shouldn't I just use a button tag instead of an anchor?
Because a button tag is usually tied to a form.
Not necessarily.
Because what you're doing is linking to something, so you should use an anchor tag.
Correct. Because that's semantically what I mean to do. I mean to link to another document on this site. That can look however, but a button is a semantic tag also. A button means you are performing an action on the page. I'm not performing an action here. I'm just linking to something. How that looks has nothing to do with what tag I choose to use. All right.
Hey, Kyle, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I put the text align in the hero section instead of creating like a separate call to action.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any reason to do the call to action instead of just putting it in the hero, or like is it better to split up the pieces like that?
So with this, the H1 isn't in the call to action, but it is a part of the hero. So, and this like takes some experience and it takes a little bit of bravery, but I'm not even kind of in love with the word hero for here because I think it implies too much about how this is supposed to look. Your markup shouldn't have anything to do with how the thing looks. It should have everything to do with what something is. And like, here's a kind of extreme example of that. That call to action So it's got the paragraph and it's got that anchor tag. On flex items, you don't even have to present things in the order that they appear in. So I could make that come later than that if that's how it should look. So always do your markup based on what it means. What is the relationship between these things? That's what you're indicating there. You can always make something look different with the CSS, especially in 2020. And I have never regretted doing that because it gives you so much more flexibility. As soon as your layout becomes really tightly coupled with your like visual presentation, now when you want to change the visual look of something, you have to change so many fucking things. And since that becomes expensive, you don't do it, even if you like probably should. I'll give you a good example. This site looked nothing like this last year. But what we did this year, just deleted the style sheets and made new ones. I didn't have to rewrite any tests. I didn't have to worry about any functionality being broken. I just changed some style sheets. That gives you a ton of confidence. In fact, I had a contractor work on the styles for this year, and I didn't have to like constantly be worried that Liz was doing something that might, I mean, like we process $100,000 of shit through there every year. Like, I didn't even worry that like any of the functionality was broken. I didn't have to check anything or test anything. I looked at the git commit diff and it's all CSS files. All right, cool. There's nothing that could break. That's nice. Cool. So how do I make Learn More look like a button?
You could put padding.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. So call to action A, do a little bit of padding. All right, it appears to have some padding now. What else?
Give it a background color.
Okay. So Sneed is probably going to go more to the green side of this, I think. That's going to be our call to action. Because Sneed's all about money. I mean, we all know that. So I'm going to start here. Oops, red, green. Sorry, other way. 120. Okay. Well, it's maybe a little less saturated than that. So knock down the saturation. Also feels a little dark. So I'm going to up the lightness. Yeah. All right. I think I want a little bit less padding. Maybe a little bit more on the sides than on top. So could split the difference and say maybe that. Hey, that's starting to look all right. Okay, how do I continue to make this not look so bad?
Maybe also add some into the button so it's not right on the have fear.
Yeah. So things like this, you got to make a choice. Do I want the that paragraph text to push the button down, or do I want the button to push the text up? And so what I would, the way that I usually think of this is, if I was reusing this, if I was doing this somewhere else, what would it do? Like, would I ever want something snugged right up against this big text? I think the answer is no. Would I ever want something to be able to be on top of a button like this? conceivably. So that tells me that that should be pushing that one down. So I can say margin bottom 16 pixels. Okay, maybe a little more. And you can also use the dev tools to really help you out with this kind of stuff. This margin bottom, if you click on that, you can use the arrow keys to play with that a little bit. So yeah, let's do 32. All right. What else can I do to make this not look so crappy?
Give it a border.
Okay.
Box shadow.
Well, let's see what the border looks like. Do 1 pixel, solid, black. Oops, wrong one. Ooh, that's starting to get into like GeoCities kind of land, or like mid-aughts. So this is one of the things I see the most in student projects. Like when I'm just smacking capstones around, like be real careful about just throwing borders on stuff. It's the equivalent, it's the visual equivalent of explaining a joke. You're like, you see, this all belongs together. It's like, yeah, I got that. But the problem we're trying to solve with that border is that this doesn't have any dimension to it.
You shadow it?
So we can shadow it and so we can shadow that and give it some dimension. Check this shit out. So I do maybe 0, 2 pixels, 2 pixels. This is horizontal offset, vertical offset, how much of it is blurred, and then we pick a color. So another pro tip, you can do one that's, and this is so much easier with HSL, we can pick that same green color and then just make it super fucking dark. And it sort of makes it look more like it belongs with it. See that? Now it's like exploding off the page. That's pretty cool.
Maybe give it some border radius too.
Yeah, we can radius those borders. So what that's going to do is make it a little bit more rounded. The reason you would like pick something like that, take a look at the typeface. Look how like round and bubbly that is. If that's round and bubbly, we want that to be kind of a recurring theme in the look of this. And so if we also do that with these borders, that's helping it, everything kind of look like it belongs together. So I can say I want 5 pixels of that corner to kind of round off. And we can also play with that. So how round do we want these? Okay, so that's called a pill. And that actually looks pretty good. It's a little bit old-timey, but I think it's coming back. So yeah, if I put 32 pixels of all right. What else?
We can change the text so that it doesn't look so much like a link.
Yes, yes, we can. So if I want to get rid of that underline, for example, that's called a text decoration. It's not part of the font. Putting a line under something, a typographer doesn't need to consult on that one. It's just a decoration on an existing font. And you'll notice, knowing that difference between a typeface and a font really comes in handy, remembering that that's text decoration and not font decoration. And then this is font size and not text size. The things that are like, the typographer had to weigh in on those are prefixed with font. Things that the browser is just like decorating something with, all of those start with text. Okay, hey, that's starting to get there. What else can I do to make it look less like an anchor?
Change the color.
Yeah. So got a couple options here. What we're going for is contrast. And so we can go with like white. And that sort of works, but it gets kind of hard to read a little bit. So pro tip, this is called reversing the text. Anytime the text is lighter than the background, that's called reversed text. Anytime you do that, you need to step up the weight a little bit too. So since we already have it, let's see what that 900 weight would look like on this. Probably too much. Oh, it actually kind of works. Might want to up the size a little bit though. Yeah, that sort of works. I like that. Another thing we can do if we want to get a little bit creative with it, like that white is probably the right choice there, but we might have other like smaller buttons or something like that where that contrast is too extreme. And what you can do is the exact same thing we were doing with that box shadow. If you base it off of the original color, so that's just a 95% white, but it's got a little bit of that green in it. Like it's less contrast, but that can really help with those things, especially if you reverse it. Like another way you can like create more dimension is if I flip these two things around. That looks so much better than if I try to do black text on that. And I can even like darken that up a little bit. A little too much. And then so we can do stuff like that that ends up creating a lot of like those things belong together. They're one thing and they have that dimension without doing something kind of harsh like that, which starts looking a little bit more GeoCities-y. Cool. So last thing we need to do, and then we'll break for lunch, is heroes are supposed to have like background images, right? Like, this looks pretty cool. But what would I be afraid of? What is Sneed? And so like, we can go to Unsplash and grab something. Unsplash is a great resource for huge, high quality, like open license pictures. So looking for something kind of fun. Ooh, I like this. So I'm going to grab that picture. Shoot, what was it called? GRZ. So I'm going to move that picture into here, and I'm going to call it, rename it to like hero.jpg. All right, so now I just have that file in this folder. So for my hero, to make that a background image, I say that the background is URL, and then, I don't think it has quotes actually, hero.jpg. There we go. Okay, so now this presents some other problems. Like it's way too big. Now like these colors don't quite work anymore. So we got to figure out a way around that. We got a couple options. So there's this background size property that will help us deal with how that spread works. We say background size cover. Hey, there we go. Now it's starting to look a little bit more like the thing. And then, oh shoot, I'm wondering if I can filter that. Let's see. Background color filter, background image filter. Shit, that was what I was worried about. Ooh, interesting. Oh, that's kind of cool. So you can set multiple background images for something. So if I do background image and say that I want it to be linear gradient. So that's going to be a color and an image. And then I can blend them together. Let's see what that does. Hey now. All right. Starting to get some action there. So I could even probably do some kind of color wash. Like if I did something like HSL red, green, blue. Let's say I want to like kind of wash that blue, like a really light blue maybe. I could do something like 240, 50%, 80%, and then that same thing here. Okay, you lighten that up more. Shoot, I go the other direction. What if I just keep the gradient in there? How does that work? Huh, maybe it really does need to be black. Can I put any color in it? There we go. Hey, that's starting to get there a little bit. And now that I have that darker background, I wonder if I can put a couple of them in there and sort of layer it. I don't think that helped. Maybe I have enough contrast to reverse the text of this call to action. that. Hey, that sort of works. That has enough weight to stand out on that background. Maybe do the same thing with this one. And one of the reasons that even though this is the H1, that we don't need to do a whole, like, I see too many people do shit like this, where they'll just make their H1 font size. They'll just make their like H1s enormous. Keep in mind that what you're trying to do is like make something important. Something being in the upper left corner of anything that you're reading in the West, it's already important. So you don't need to do quite as much to make it pop because you already gave it the most important position on the page. Oops. Even still, that's probably a little too small still. Font size. Cool. That sort of works. Now, moment of truth. How's it work on mobile? Not terrible. Especially since we didn't even put the what's it? The little CSS. We go like, fuck, what is it?
The media queries?
No, CSS Mobile Initial-Scale. It's a meta tag that we can add to our HTML that fixes most things.
Meta name equals viewport, content equals device width.
This is the one. If you just
Initial
throw that in
scale.
your HTML, like this solves like a lot of your responsiveness issues like right off the bat. See? Cool. So the one thing I would change about this for mobile is I want like that 64 pixels is a little bit too big. So what would look right? Okay, so what if I did something like that? Do like 26. Now we also need to knock that button down, but we can do this with a media query. What that looks like is I can say @media max width, and then what is this at right now? 375. And now any rules that I write inside of this will only apply to things that are 375 pixels or less. So I can do something like knock this down to 26 pixels. And that H1, I can bring back down to 16 pixels. And then that button, I can knock down a bit too. Oop. No? Oh, it's because it's coming later. That's why. Same specificity. Okay, it's a little bit too small now. There, I tweaked some sizes, and all of a sudden, it looks pretty good on a phone.
Hey, Kyle.
Yeah.
How do you import that image, like that downloaded image, into your?
I did it like this. Background image is the property, and URL, it's like a function, and you pass the path into it. No quotes around it.
Where did you where did you rename it to hero.jpg?
Oh, during my move command. So this was the command.
Oh, okay. So you just like renamed it in your term.
Yeah, since moving moves a document and renames it, you can do both of those at the same time with one command.
Okay.
Wait, did you add it to your directory for this project?
Yep, that's what this command is doing. I took it out of my downloads folder, and then I'm moving it to where I am right now and renaming it to hero.jpg. I could have also done that exact same thing like this, but that works.
So say you have like a site with like many images and you're trying to like, save on storage or how much it's taken up. Is it better to go in and actually crop these photos or, readjust their size?
Oh God, yeah.
Pixel-wise?
Yeah, this thing is huge. So if I
Yeah.
do it ls-lh, yeah, the thing's almost 2 megabytes. That's like more than the entire site should be. So yeah, you're going to want to crop that and lower the resolution, and it helps to do some of the filtering, like in a photo editing tool, so that like you're not making the person's CSS do it. But like I've done black and white filters and stuff for like users upload images, and I want the images to look black and white on the site, regardless of how they did it. You can do that with CSS, but you're making the user's computer work harder.
Gotcha.
What else?
Kyle, I'm having trouble finding like the photo that I downloaded in my terminal.
Mhm.
Do you have a trick for like how you would find that again?
Yep. So I looked over here and went, all right, so it's GRZ, or like, this one's probably still there. It's a 30E. And so then I go, all those go into my downloads folder. So 30 and then tab, and it'll autocomplete for you.
Okay.
And that picture in particular is a favorite. I wonder if I can set a GIF as the background image. Let's see. Name it. There you go. Any other questions? Well, hopefully this was educational and everybody learned something. I had a good time. Elsewise, have a good lunch.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.
That was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.